Okay, UFC 295 this Saturday night from Madison Square Garden, New York City, in the main event for the light heavyweight championship of the world, vacated by Jamal Hill due to injury. Now in the main event, Yuri Prochazka takes on Alex Pereira. Pereira looks to become a two-division champion, and of course for Yuri Prochazka, he looks to regain the championship. He never lost. He vacated, of course, the championship due to injury as well. In the co-main event for the interim heavyweight championship, you have Tom Aspinall versus Sergey Pavlovich. Now, the winner of this fight likely will never fight Jon Jones or Stipe Miocic, but the winner of this fight is going to get put in that Robert Whittaker position when Whittaker won the interim championship, when George St. Pierre was going to fight Michael Bisping. The winner of this fight will be the world champion someday. It's just a matter of when, and it's just, a matter of when Jones and Stipe fight, so Jones or Stipe can go retire. So this fight is for the heavyweight championship, but the weird thing is it's not going to be for the heavyweight championship until post-April when Jon and Stipe fight. So the winner of this bout will be the heavyweight champion, the undisputed heavyweight champion in April. But for now, they'll be the interim champion. It's weird. But that's, the two headlining fights here on UFC 295. It is a 12-fight card. Obviously, Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic were supposed to be in the main event. They're not anymore, but this is now your 12-fight card. And folks, if you haven't yet, though, make sure that subscribe button down below for some more UFC here on the channel. We've got some UFC 5 on the channel as well, and there's a bunch of stuff coming. So let's get into this 12-fight card, starting it off. First, with our first fight, it will be Dennis Buzukja taking on Jamal Emmers in this fight. For Dennis, he's going to come into this fight off his first fight in the UFC where he lost to Sean Woodson. For Jamal Emmers, 19-7 professional record, coming off a loss in his last fight to Jack Jenkins. Before that, a win over Hussein Askabov by unanimous decision. For Emmers, this is a guy that's been around the UFC for a while. I mean, you look at the record, 2-3. It feels like he's been around for a while, but still, 5 fights. It does date all the way back to the beginning of the pandemic in 2020. That's why, again, Emmers does feel like he's been there for a while. However, the activity has not been great prior to this year. 2 fights in the last 3 years. He comes back in 2023, though. This will be his 3rd fight in 2023, so a lot more activity coming for Jamal Emmers. Again, the biggest win of his career, I would say, is the win over Hussein Askabov. Askabov beating Askabov by unanimous decision. This is a guy in Askabov who was undefeated at the time. Emmers goes in there. He beats him by unanimous decision. Again, it was Hussein Askabov, the same guy that we thought he was in the regionals. Well, again, his record outside the UFC didn't look great considering the guys he had fought. They weren't too many big names out there, or at least just, the records of the guys he was fighting wasn't that great. So Emmers goes in there, he beats him, he, wrestles him, out-wrestles him in the 3rd round, out-conditions and out-strikes him in the first couple rounds. It's a good win for Jamal Emmers. The other one in the UFC is a winner of Vince Cachero, beating him by unanimous decision in August of 2020. The loss is Giga Chikadze in his first bout, actually pre-pandemic. Adesanya Romero, the first one before the pandemic, in March of 2020, losing the fight by split decision. And then after that, the loss to Pat Sabatini, where Emmers has the toe hold. Sabatini's got the heel hook. Obviously, the heel hook is going to do more damage than the toe hold. Sabatini wins the fight. Now, we're going to talk about Pat Sabatini later on in this card. He's in a big fight on the main card. But that's what we got for Jamal Emmers. He's taking on Dennis Buzukja here in this fight. Probably butchering the name. I know he fought Sean Woodson in his last one, lost it by unanimous decision. Before that, was fighting in CFFC, Ring of Combat, UAE Warriors. Got his original shot in the UFC, or at least in the Contender Series back in 2020. Fighting a guy by the name of course, Melzik Bagdasaryan. For Bagdasaryan, 3-1 in the UFC, showing some really good, results so far in the promotion. So not a horrible loss, losing to Bagdasaryan. Since then, again for Buzukja, big winning streak, won 7 fights, then ran into Sean Woodson in his last one, lost it by decision. That was on the Jon Jones and Ciryl Gane card. Woodson just outstrikes him, Woodson outgrapples him. All around, Woodson does enough to win the fight. I think this was, originally was not supposed to be Buzukja in this spot. It was supposed to be Sean Woodson versus Marion Santos. Of course, Santos had to withdraw. I think it was originally supposed to be Steve Garcia, but Woodson, of course, and then Jesse Butler. So actually, Buzukja was the 4th guy for Sean Woodson in the card. Woodson wins the fight by unanimous decision. So super late notice in that last one for Dennis. I think Jamal Emmers is going to get him in this fight. I think Emmers all around is the better fighter. You look at the odds for this one. Emmers minus 270. You got Buzukja coming back at plus 220. Makes sense. Again, Emmers the guy. Yes, he is 2-3 in the UFC, but he's seen some really tough guys. Losses to Giga Chikadze. Lost to Pat Sabatini. I know Jack Jenkins feels like the one outlier. It's a split decision loss because Jenkins lost the last fight to Tefe Mariscal. It was due to injury, but still. Again, that's the one outlier, but Jenkins fought a pretty competitive fight in Jacksonville. Emmers fought a pretty competitive fight with Jenkins in that one. He obviously wins the 3rd round. The first 2 are razor thin. I think the second one you can give to Jenkins. The second round you give to Jenkins. The first round, man, it's so tight. You look at the significant strike count, 21-20 in favor of Jamal Emmers, but obviously when you look at damage, it's a really close fight. They give it to Jack Jenkins. I'm not mad at it. One judge gave all 3 to Jamal Emmers. Not mad with that scorecard as well. It's a really tough fight. I think all around Emmers is the better fighter, though. Again, I think Emmers is able to out-wrestle Dennis Buzukja. I think he's able to outstrike him as well. Again, Sean Woodson was able to beat Dennis in his last fight. I think Jamal Emmers would have a pretty good chance against Sean Woodson if they were to fight. I know MMA math does not work that way, but still, I think Emmers is all around the better fighter. So give me Jamal Emmers to win the opener here at MSG. He's going to get it done by unanimous decision. Next up, we've got a fight here between Josh Van. It will be his second UFC fight, taking on Kevin Borjas in this fight. For Van, 8-1 professionally, coming off his last fight where he beat Zhalgas Zhumagulov by split decision. And now, unlike some of Zhumagulov's other really close split decision losses, this one was a pretty, I felt like Joshua Van won the fight pretty convincingly. Now, split decision's tough, of course, because different judges see different things. I thought it was a pretty easy 2-1 for Van in that fight. Again, Van takes over as the fight continues to go. The first round, it's a Zhalgas-Zhumagulov round. Zhumagulov outstrikes Van. He takes him down in the process as well. From the second and third, Van starts to take over. And really, you don't see much more wrestling out of Zhumagulov. He goes 1 for 4 in his takedowns in the first round. Doesn't attempt to take down the rest of the fight. Attempts 1 in the second round. But again, Van is able to stuff it. And Josh Van goes on the offense after that, outstriking Zhumagulov in both the second and third rounds. And really just showed the output is there and the conditioning and the cardio is there as well. Joshua Van, 120 significant strikes in that fight against Zhalgas Zhumagulov. He's taking on the Peruvian fighter here in Kevin Borjas. Borjas coming off a win just 3 months ago on the Contender Series, beating Victor Diaz by unanimous decision. He struggled a little bit, and I would say actually he struggled a lot with the wrestling out of Victor Diaz. Diaz was, kept going back to that wrestling base, but Borjas was winning all those moments on the feet. You give the first round of Diaz, you give 2 and 3 to Borjas, because Borjas was that good, putting on the pressure and putting the pace on Victor Diaz, and again, the striking game as a whole was just so much better out of Borjas than Victor Diaz. But when you look at what he was able to do before the UFC or before the Contender Series, 3-fight winning streak, winning fights on Inca FC against not the best guys, though. Of course, the Inca FC is going to be in Peru, obviously the Incan tribe back in the day. I learned that from my 4th grade social studies class. But again, Kevin Borjas won 3 straight fights over there, fought in Combate once. He ended up losing the fight back in 2019. But the activity isn't all there prior to the UFC, and the list, the resume honestly is not all that great from Borjas either. He's taken on a guy, though, in Josh Van, who, took on some really tough guys prior to the UFC, the best fight being the Paris Moran fight, beating Moran and going in there and finishing him in the second round. Moran's a guy who's main evented multiple shows for Fury UFC. He's a guy who feels like, I think, either he's going to be a short notice fight for the UFC. He's only 27 years old. He's either going to be on the Contender Series next year or he's going to step in on short notice. I thought he was going to get his UFC contract after his win in the main event over Anthony Doe in 2022. He beats Doe by unanimous decision. But then, no, they book him again on Fury UFC. 3 months later, he loses to Van, wins 2 fights after that against not the greatest guys. But I think you will see Paris Moran in the UFC. And Joshua Van's a guy who stunts the momentum of Moran and stops Moran for at least right now being in the UFC. So he finishes Moran in the second round, doesn't get a shot in the UFC after that, instead takes on Cleveland McLean for the Fury UFC Flyweight Championship, the vacant championship. He beats him by rear naked choke in the second round, then gets the shot on short notice against Zhalgas Zhumagulov. Originally, this Borjas fight was scheduled for the Contender Series in August. Obviously, again, Van was signed to the UFC to take on Zhumagulov instead. Borjas wins. Here we are. I think Van wins the fight. I all around think he's the better fighter. I don't know if we see much wrestling in this one, again, because Borjas, that's where he wants to fight. That's where he struggled some in the Contender. Borjas is, just primarily a striker. 8 wins by knockout, 1 by decision. For Van, 5 by knockout, 1 by decision, 2 by submission. If anything, the grappling and wrestling advantage does go to Joshua Van in this fight. But I think Joshua Van's all around the way better striker. I think he's got heavy hands. Only 22 years old. Fighting out of Texas. I think he's the way better guy here. You look at the odds for this fight. You got Van minus 245, Borjas plus 200. I understand those odds. I think Joshua Van's the way better fighter. I think he wins this fight by unanimous decision. I could see a finish 2 from Van, considering, again, he does have a lot of speed and a lot of power for being a 125-pounder, but I'm still going to take him by decision. I think it goes the distance. But give me the fearless Josh Van to go 2-0 in the UFC at 22 years old, beating Kevin Borjas by unanimous decision. Next up, we have got a fight here between John Castaneda and Kyung Ho Kang for the nickname Sexy Mexi for John Castaneda. I can't believe I just said that. Every time he fights, because Bruce Buffer says it. It's just like... Anyways, he's taking on Kyung-Ho Kang in this fight. For Kyung-Ho Kang, we'll start with him. His last fight being a rear naked choke finish in the first round, a win over Christian Quinones, submitting him, in the first round on the Vettori Cannonier card. Before that, beating Dana Bakary by unanimous decision in a way that I did not think he was going to beat Dana Bakary. Comes in there, just outstrikes him. Because Kyung-Ho Kang, for the most part, is known as a primary grappler. He is a jiu-jitsu guy who's trying to get you down. He's going to try to, wrestle you and try to get you down. The Dana Bakary fight, didn't see much of that. Kyung-Ho Kang attempts 2 takedowns in the second round, doesn't get him, no problem. He goes out there, that's the only round he really loses. He wins the other 2, beating Dana Bakary on the feet. You can make the case Bakary does win the first round too, but it's very close. Give it to Kyung-Ho Kang, he wins the fight. Bakary's in a tough spot now, and then after that, of course, most recently for Kyung-Ho Kang, submitting Christian Quinones in the first round. This is the first time since 2019 where Kyung-Ho Kang has fought multiple times in one calendar year. That's, interesting, but again, here he is taking on a guy in John Castaneda. For Castaneda, 20-6 professionally, 3-2 in the UFC. I remember when he was signed, it was just a real interesting signing because he was coming off, he lost 2 out of his last 3 fights. He beats Marcelo Rojo, who again is a UFC fighter, but then comes into the UFC, loses to Nathaniel Wood, finishes Eddie Wineland, buries the ghost of Eddie Wineland at that point, finishes him in the first round, submits Miles Johns, which was a pretty big upset at the time, loses to Daniel Santos, then beats Munin Gafurov in his last fight by unanimous decision, and now he gets Kyung-Ho Kang. Again, normally prior to the Dana Bakary fight with Kyung-Ho Kang, I think, all right, well, easy. Castaneda is the striker, Kyung-Ho Kang is the grappler. I know Castaneda is able to mix it up on the ground. We've seen him with the big submission win over Miles Johns. He took down Munin Gafurov a lot in their fight, did knock him down as well. But for the most part, you're going to see Castaneda work the hands. You're going to see the occasional switch up with the grappling as well. But you're going to see both, right? Kyung-Ho Kang is a guy who, again, primary grappler, but has shown the striking ability more recently. Still, though, I would take John Castaneda in a striking fight. But of course, if the fight hits the mat, I would favor Kyung-Ho Kang, which makes it really interesting because, again, Castaneda can stay competitive on the ground with Kyung-Ho Kang, but Kyung-Ho Kang can also stay competitive on the feet with John Castaneda. So both these guys really even each other out. Like, yeah, again, I'd give the slight grappling advantage to Kyung-Ho Kang, but I'd also give just the slight striking advantage to John Castaneda at the same time. Real close fight. Kyung-Ho Kang, 36 years of age, Castaneda, 31. I'm going to go with the South Korean fighter here. I'm going to take Kyung-Ho Kang to win the fight. I think, again, the improvements in the striking game that we have seen more recently out of him, you saw what he was able to do in the Dana Bakary fight. I think that's impressive. I think Dana Bakary, again, he is not the guy that we thought he was at one point, but again, the ability to go in there and outstrike him for 15 minutes is huge. I think Castaneda is going to need some big shots. He's going to need to really put it on Kyung-Ho Kang and wobble him and knock him down, because that's how Castaneda wins most of his fights. Every fight except for one in the UFC for Castaneda, he has gotten a knockdown. The only one being his original fight in the UFC, or first fight in the UFC, against Nathaniel Wood. Every fight after that against Wineland, John, Santos, and Gafurov, Castaneda has got a knockdown. So that's going to be a big factor in this fight as well. If Kyung-Ho Kang can stay on his feet the entire fight, I think he's going to win it, though. I'll take Kyung-Ho Kang to take it by unanimous decision. Okay, our next fight's going to be Mark Madsen taking on Jared Gordon. Obviously, Gordon, got most of his popularity. Most people know Jared Gordon from this fight against Paddy Pimblett. Now, again, he beat Paddy Pimblett. That was ridiculous how he lost the fight. Now, Paddy's going to be back later this year against Tony Ferguson. We'll see how that goes. Tony Ferguson's going to get knocked out by Paddy Pimblett, isn't he? I hate to say that, but, I don't know. Jared Gordon, though, after that, gets kind of punished by the UFC, so they tell him, you know what, you go fight Bobby Green because you gave Paddy Pimblett a tough fight. He has the no contest with Bobby Green, the clash of heads at the end of the first round, deemed a no contest, obviously. Then they book him less than 2 months later against Jim Miller. It didn't make any sense because Gordon got knocked down in the fight against Bobby Green. It was just a clash of heads. They try to book him against Jim Miller right away. Gordon withdraws at the last second, which I think was good for his career. I didn't like that. I don't know why going into that week, Gordon's a minus 250 favorite, and Jim Miller's like plus 220. I was like, what are we doing here? Anyways, I took Jim Miller originally that week. Fight never happened. Gordon's going to be taking on Mark Madsen in this fight. You know what Mark Madsen does. I mean, the nickname, says it itself. He's the former Olympic wrestler is Mark Madsen. However, 39 years of age now. That's interesting. The guy was undefeated going into his last fight last November, over a year ago, where he lost to Grant Dawson. Dawson submits him in the third round. Main event of that fight night card, Marina Rodriguez and Amanda Lemos. Now, I did not remember that fight happened. You did not remember that main event happened. It's whatever. But Mark Madsen loses to Grant Dawson. He loses up by a naked choke. Before that, beats Vince Pichel, beats Clay Guida, beats Austin Hubbard. I mean, again, you know what Mark Madsen's going to go out there and do. He's going to try to wrestle guys, and he's going to try to keep them down. However, again, the Mark Madsen-Grant Dawson fight, Dawson took him down, and Dawson got the submission in the third. Actually, we got the submission in the third by knocking Madsen down, but the first 2 rounds was Grant Dawson out wrestling Mark Madsen for the most part. So it's really, this is an interesting fight because, again, Gordon, where he found success in the Paddy fight, he outstruck Paddy at times. He took Pimblett down. His last loss, other than that, it's Grant Dawson, where Dawson was able to control him and hold him on the ground. Again, Grant Dawson does that to a lot of guys in this weight class. Bobby Green obviously didn't do that too because Green knocked him out in the first 50 seconds, but Gordon has had problems in terms of wrestling, at least in some of these fights against Dawson, against Joe Selecki. He didn't allow Leo Santos to do that to him. He just outstruck Leo Santos the entire fight. His last win back in August of 2022 in Salt Lake City. It's going to be a real interesting fight because this is really dependent on if Jared Gordon keep the fight standing because you don't want to be, I mean, okay, it's not like Mark Madsen's this crazy submission threat because that's not what he is. He's a pure wrestler who's going to try to hold you down, and he's not going to look for submission. He's not going to be like Jailton Almeida where he's going to prioritize, trying to find the submission instead of just going for ground and pound. Because again, Jailton Almeida should have just looked to punch Derek Lewis, but he decided not to. For Mark Madsen, he's not going to really look for submissions. You might see him attempt a submission, but I don't think he's attempted a submission in his entire UFC run. You're going to see him more, again, try to work ground and pound once he gets the fight down to the ground. His striking isn't that great. We've seen him outstrike a guy like Clay Guida in the past, but that's not saying much. So if the fight's on the feet, Mark Madsen probably loses. If the fight is on the ground, Madsen's probably able to control, and it's really all dependent on if Mark Madsen can get a takedown. I'm going to say, yeah, I'm going to take Mark Madsen to actually win by decision. Don't forget the success he's had prior to the Grant Dawson fight. Yeah, he lost to Grant Dawson, but Jared Gordon also lost to Grant Dawson, and a lot of guys lose to Grant Dawson. I know Madsen's older, he's 39 years old, but again, the wrestling base, you can't teach that. It's really hard to stop if he can really go all 15 minutes in this fight, which we have seen him do before. Yes, he is tired at some points in those 15-minute fights, and looking at the Vince Pichel fight where he really did not look good in the third. The Clay Guida fight didn't look that great in the third round either. You can make the case he won that third round in the Guida fight, but again, I don't like that, but I think if Madsen's able to win the first 2 rounds, he's able to win the fight. So give me Mark Madsen to win by unanimous decision. Not one of my more confident picks, but Gordon has been pretty iffy recently. I'm going to take Madsen to win. I'm going to take the underdog by unanimous decision. I think Dana White would like to see that because of what Gordon did to Paddy Pimblett. On to our next one. We have got Nazim Sadykhov taking on Slavakaz, of course, Vaishlev Borshchev in this one. For Slava Borshchev, his last fight being a win over Mahashet. Apparently Mahashet's got a last name now. I'm not going to... Mahashet Haizer. Anyways, Slava Borshchev beats him by knockout in the second round. For Nazim Sadykhov, his last fight, the rear naked choke finish win over Terrence McKinney. It's interesting with Terrence McKinney because, McKinney loses to a lot of these guys who are, have wins in the UFC, and then he takes on guys who haven't fought in the UFC yet. And of course, Terrence McKinney steamrolls all of them. It's just interesting. Now McKinney's, a rather well-known fighter, so you want to keep him in the promotion. You want to keep giving him fights that he can just straight bulldoze guys in. But it's just an interesting thing, right? So for Slava Borshchev, UFC run 2 and 3. He comes in off the Contender Series where he beats Chris Duncan, huge win where he beats Duncan in the second round, then beats Dakota, nicknamed Dakota Harry Bush, by first round knockout in his first fight in the UFC. Of course, that though is the liver shot. He loses to Mark DeCasey in a fight where DeCasey puts on the wrestling boots and just wrestles him for 15 minutes. Now, that's what DeCasey just did to Fernandez in his last fight in Brazil just last night. Loses to Mike Davis after that, does Slava Borshchev. Mike Davis, a guy that, can he just fight more? Davis doesn't really fight that often. He's 3-1 in the UFC. He's on a 3-fight winning streak. However, he's been in the UFC since 2019. He's had 4 fights. You want to see more activity out of this guy. We haven't seen him in a year. Davis goes out there and out-wrestles Borshchev. Borshchev knocks out Mahashet in his last one, knocks him down 3 times, eventually gets the finish in the second round. For Nazim Sadykhov, he's got kind of the style to beat Borshchev if he applies it. I know, again, Sadykhov has shown really good striking. Yeah, he's won a lot of fights by knockout. But if he's just able to hold Borshchev down, there is a really easy pathway to success as well. Again, you're looking at the submission win over Terrence McKinney. Now, Sadykhov was not the guy who initiated that grappling exchange. That was McKinney in the first round, really looking for takedowns. In the second round, of course, Sadykhov finds the rear naked choke. But if Sadykhov's able to go on his own offense in terms of wrestling, that's how you beat Borshchev. That is the easiest way to beat Slava Borshchev. He's a good striker. He's got a lot of skills. Yeah, sure, you can also beat him on the feet as well. But truly, the easiest pathway to success for Azerbaijan's Nazim Sadykhov will be the wrestling and will be the grappling, because his grappling game is so much better than Borshchev's is. And again, I know Sadykhov's got a lot of wins by knockout before, but still, that's definitely the best pathway to success for Sadykhov, who trains out of Serra-Longo over in New York. Borshchev's a team alpha male guy, of course, from Sacramento. You know, I think that's going to be Sadykhov's best pathway to success. He's only shot one takedown so far in his UFC career. He got it against Evan Elder. Elder actually knocked Sadykhov down in that fight, but Sadykhov comes back and knocks him out in the third round. Really good back and forth fight. Now, that fight between Elder and Sadykhov, which happened in February of this year, that's what the Borshchev fight's got all the potential to be. Because Borshchev will swing with you, Sadykhov will swing with you. Both these guys are really fun fighters in the feet. They've got a lot of stuff they'll throw at you. However, again, the fight can either go like that, and Sadykhov could win that way, could win by knockout. But the other way, and maybe the more entertaining way, is that Sadykhov, or not more entertaining way, but the easier way at least, if you're picking Sadykhov, will be towards grappling. If Sadykhov's able to get Slava Borshchev down, he's able just to ground him. And again, he submitted Terrence McKinney quite easily once he, in that second round. The first round, again, McKinney did really well on the ground, but in that second, Sadykhov was able to find be able to find the back and get the submission. Again, that's how Borshchev has lost back-to-back fights against Casey and Mike Davis. He gives up 20 combined takedowns in those two fights. He gets taken down twice in the Dakota Bush fight. Chris Duncan took him down 2 times. Mahashet's not really the guy who's going to do that. So that's how Borshchev, again, was a pretty easy pick in that fight. I believe the odds were kind of close. But yeah, again, I don't think Borshchev's grappling is all that good. His defensive wrestling, not very good. Everything points in this fight to Nazim Sadykhov winning by submission. I think, again, he will go on the offensive when it comes to wrestling. And I don't think it's going to be that hard for him. I'm going to go Nazim Sadykhov first finish I've picked on this card. Going Nazim Sadykhov to win this fight by first round submission. I think that's how much of a mismatch you have on the ground in this fight. So yeah, I'm going to take Sadykhov to win. I got him by first round sub. Next up, we've got ranked fighters here. Actually, one ranked fighter in the strawweight division. Or no, Godinez is ranked 2 now. So 2 ranked fighters in the women's strawweight division. You've got Tabitha Ricci taking on Lupi Godinez in this one. For Ricci, undefeated in the 115-pound division so far in the UFC. Her first fight, of course, was at 125, where on short notice, where she loses to Manon Fiorot. Again, Fiorot is a fighter who might be fighting for a world championship next. And for Lupita Godinez, or Lupi Godinez, she is always active now on a 3-fight winning streak. This is a fighter who made her UFC debut back in 2021. She has now fought 9 fights. Will be her 10th fight in just about 2.5 years. That's how active Lupi Godinez is. Coming off a big win in her last fight on Mexican Independence Day, she takes down Elise Reed. That was a mismatch if I've ever seen one. She submits Elise Reed in the second round, beats Emily Ducote before that by unanimous decision. It beats Cynthia Calvillo before that by split decision. It was probably by far the easiest fight that she's had in that little 3-fight stretch, and it's the most recent fight for her. But she's won 5 out of her last 6, the one loss being Angela Hill. She drops a fight to Angela Hill by unanimous decision, and that's kind of what happens when you fight Hill at times. That's why I picked her to beat Denise Gomez. It happened. She was an underdog. Angela Hill wins. Godinez, though, 6-3 in the UFC. The loss is coming to Luana Carolina, up a weight class at 125 pounds, and on a week's notice, literally a week's notice. A loss to Angela Hill, and then her first fight in the UFC against Jessica Penne, in a fight that a lot of people thought that Godinez won. Lupi Godinez is going to bring a lot at you. It's going to be mostly wrestling, though. That's where she excels. Her striking is getting better. She found her first knockdown in the UFC in her last fight against Elise Reed, but it will be the power wrestling game out of Lupi Godinez that is going to win her a lot of fights. For Tabitha Ricci, really good jiu-jitsu, and that's what makes this fight really interesting, because Tabitha Ricci is going to try to submit you. Now, she's only pulled off one submission win so far in the UFC. Comes at UFC 285, where she submits Jessica Penne in the second round. But every fight that Tabitha Ricci has had in the 115-pound division, she has found takedowns, and she's found at least 3 of them. First fight against Maria Oliveira, takes her down 5 times. Poliana Fiana fight, takes her down 5 times, and Viana, a good jiu-jitsu practitioner in her own right. Jessica Penne fight, 4 takedowns, submission in the second. Jillian Robertson fight, another good jiu-jitsu fighter, though. Ricci in Jacksonville takes her down 3 times, outstrikes her as well, and that's how we are now here for Tabitha Ricci, who's ranked number 10 in the strawweight division, and Lupita Godinez, who is ranked number 13. Godinez, I've seen a lot of different odds for this fight. I don't think the odds are correct that I have on the screen. They've really moved back and forth. On best fight odds, I've seen Ricci as the favorite, I believe, but on the UFC's website, they have Godinez as the favorite. I need to check this real quick. But yeah, I believe, best fight odds has, my apologies, I just messed it up. Godinez should be the favorite, Ricci should be the underdog. Okay, I understand. However, I think this is a really good spot for plus money for Tabitha Ricci. Again, the jiu-jitsu's there. If Godinez takes her down, Ricci's going to be really good off her back. But again, I think this fight's really going to come down to who gets the takedown, because whoever does have the takedown will be on top for most of the fight. Yes, Ricci's jiu-jitsu game's good. Can she really reverse positioning all that often? We'll see. Hasn't had to do it yet in the UFC because she hasn't been on her back, but that's something that we will see as well. Again, Ricci has fought good jiu-jitsu fighters. She hasn't fought anyone, though, of the wrestling prowess that Lope Godinez does have, and that's why this fight is really interesting. Because Godinez is going to shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot some more. Her striking game, I think, is better than Tabitha Ricci as well. Godinez has really just been coming together as a whole as a fighter, as she's gone on so far in her UFC career. Again, odds favor Godinez. You look at Tapology, I'd assume it would be close. Ricci 68% and Godinez 32%. It's a close fight, it is, because the striking game is pretty evenly matched. You know Godinez is the better wrestler, but you know Ricci's the better jiu-jitsu fighter. Again, Ricci's got her own wrestling in her own right as well. This fight is close. I'm going to take Lope Godinez. I'll take her by decision. I think Godinez's wrestling is going to be enough. I don't think Ricci's going to be able to submit her off her back, because I think Godinez again is too good for that. So if Godinez is the one pushing the pace, and Godinez is the one, if she's chasing down Ricci and she's, working her striking and she's the one shooting for takedowns and getting those takedowns, I think that's where she wins. I think Godinez's defensive wrestling is good enough to keep Ricci from shooting on her and taking her down. Godinez has been taken down, I think, 3 times in the UFC. Calvillo did it once. Good wrestler in her own right. Angela Hill's done it. Loma Luponi did it once back in 2021. Jessica Penne did it actually as well. For Ricci, been taken down twice. Jillian Robertson, Manon Fiorot. It's a real interesting fight because a lot of different things could happen, but I will take Lope Godinez because I think Godinez is going to be able to chase her down. I think Godinez is going to have the better striking, and I think Godinez will be the one getting the takedowns, and that will end up putting her on top. And again, that will, end up getting her control time. So I think Godinez wins. I'll take her by decision. I would not be surprised, though, in the slightest if Ricci's able to win, but a huge fight, though, for the top 15 of the strawweight division. Next up, we've got a fight here. One ranked fighter in this one, here at 125 pounds, but a chance to break into the top 15, for Alessandro Costa, who'll be taking on Steve Erceg in this one. For Erceg, only one fight in the UFC, but he's ranked. Now, the UFC's flyweight division is incredibly thin. It just is. Astro Boy Steve Erceg is ranked after one fight, and it's a, pretty good fight. He goes in there and he beats David Dvorak. He beats him by unanimous decision. But one fight gets needed in the rankings, and Dvorak's been a guy who's at one point was ranked like 10. Now he's lost 3 straight fights to Mateus Nicolau, Manel Kopp, and Steve Erceg. I don't know who Dvorak's going to fight next. I am assuming he's going to get one more fight in the UFC, but again, he's kind of fallen off. But Erceg, again, gets his ranking because of the win that he's able to get over Dvorak. He takes on Alessandro Costa here, who is 1-1. First fight in the UFC. Short notice, takes on Amir Albazi. He loses to Albazi by knockout in the 3rd round, but again, that's expected because Albazi's a guy who's likely going to fight Brandon Moreno, I think, next, for the winner can get a title shot. Even though I guess Moreno beats Albazi, he deserves a title shot because the winner of Royval and Pantoja, but Pantoja's already beat him 3 times, so what are we gonna do? But Costa, again, is a guy who's 1-1 in the UFC. He loses to Albazi his first fight, but then comes back and he beats Jimmy Flick. Now, he's supposed to beat Jimmy Flick. He's supposed to go out there as, my camera is going to look like this for a minute after this, until this fight's over, but just bear with me. Okay, he's supposed to beat Jimmy Flick. And Jimmy Flick's a guy who's, just kind of lost recently in the UFC. He's lost a lot. He retired at one point. He comes back. Some were to say that he's just back for money. I don't know. But pre-retirement, Jimmy Flick was really good. Costa goes out there and just beats the brakes off him. And that's kind of what's supposed to happen because Jimmy Flick is a shell of his former self. Costa now gets the Erceg fight, for Steve Erceg, known for the grappling in the regionals, fought a lot in Eternal MMA, which is probably, I would say, the biggest, promotion over in Australia. It's on Fight Pass. looked really good over there. Kept picking up wins by submission. He's got 6 of them. Comes in the UFC, beats David Dvorak by unanimous decision. You saw some of the wrestling in that fight. Saw 3 takedowns out of him, but really couldn't hold Dvorak down for an extended period of time in that fight. So that really wasn't that big of a factor in the fight. For Costa, he's going to bring it on the feet. Obviously, we've seen him finish by Albazi, but he came out there and he beat Jimmy Flick down. But again, it's Jimmy Flick in 2023. It's not the best version of Jimmy Flick. So I really don't, and Jimmy Flick's a grappler, right? But Costa, again, he's shown grappling. He's been able to do that outside the UFC. He's come into the UFC. He's shown, he's all around a pretty decent fighter. He's shown grappling. He's shown, skills on the feet as well. His Contender Series fight was really just contested on the feet. As his opponent was the one shooting on him, and he's able to keep it standing. On the ground, though, I still think Erceg's slightly better. On the feet, I think Costa does have the advantage. That's why I think it's a tough fight all around for Erceg. I think it's a really tough spot for him. I think he'll still win, but I think Costa will have him in some spots. I think Erceg's striking game, if he's able to avoid the knockout, I think he's able to win, though. If he's able to avoid the power, he's going to be the better technical striker in this fight. In terms of grappling, I think it's really evenly matched. I could go either way in that one. I think Erceg's probably the better grappler, but I think it's a really close fight. I truly think it's a really close one. Just haven't seen a lot out of both these guys. You just haven't. Again, I know the opponents in Eternal MMA are good, and I know the guys that Costa's fought in Lux have been good as well. They've fought in 2 really good regionals. You see some guys coming to the UFC and they're fighting in really bad regional promotions. You don't know what to expect out of them. Erceg and Costa are pretty solid because of the level of guys they beat outside the UFC. However, still small sample size, at least in the UFC, for a top 15 matchup. I still think the ranked fighter in Erceg is going to win. I think he'll go out there and he'll win a decision. I think he's going to be able to out-wrestle Costa and able to out-grapple him as well. And then I think he'll have moments in the feet as well. So give me Steve Erceg to win. I'm going to take him to win this one by unanimous decision. All right, starting off the main card, we've got Pat Sabatini taking on Diego Lopes. Close fight because Pat Sabatini's the guy who's 5-1 in the UFC. The only loss being the loss to Damon Jackson in 2022. Jackson goes out there and finishes him in the first round. It's a takedown early by Jackson, and it's just a TKO finish once the fight just hit the mat for Diego Lopes. Found his rise to stardom after his loss to Movsar Evloev on the main card of Sterling Cejudo, but then comes back in his last fight and submits Gavin Tucker in less than 2 minutes. Goes out there and just absolutely decimates him, gets a takedown, does Gavin Tucker, but immediately Lopes throws up the triangle armbar off his back and gets it. Lopes is that good defensively with jiu-jitsu, as you saw in the Movsar Evloev fight. How many times he looked to submit Evloev in that one? He was constant in his pursuit to submit Evloev. Now, he doesn't get the job done. Still, though, 1-5-9 in that fight, and really, made a really good showing out of himself in the fight against Evloev. They're going to test him now, though. They're going to give him a really good grappler in Pat Sabatini, a guy who I don't think is going to put himself in the position to get submitted like Gavin Tucker did. Now, Gavin Tucker, I don't believe was ever submitted prior to that fight against Lopes. No, he wasn't. He was just finished by knockout against Dan Ige, but still, I think Sabatini is a slightly better grappler than Gavin Tucker, but still, Diego Lopes is pretty good. Lopes is a really solid jiu-jitsu guy. But do we need to pump the brakes a little bit on Diego Lopes? Is he really what people think he is, just because he had a competitive fight with Evloev? I don't know. Now, I think he's still in a position where he can beat Pat Sabatini. I think it's a very winnable fight for him. Sabatini, though, 5-1 in the UFC. Lopes only 1-1. It's a true test. It's a true test on a main card of a UFC pay-per-view. Lopes currently a slight underdog. I see those odds. I think I would favor Sabatini just ever so slightly in a fight like this. Striking-wise, I think Lopes, might be a little bit better up there. Sabatini is not the best striker. Again, Sabatini wins his fights by winning them on the feet, by getting takedowns and grappling guys. However, he can do that, and he likely will land a takedown in this one. It's just a matter of what does he do once the fight is down, and what does Diego Lopes do off of his back? That's the question in this fight. Because again, I think Sabatini is able to land a takedown in this one. I think it will happen probably in the first round. But again, Gavin Tucker landed a takedown against Diego Lopes, and immediately Lopes looks for submissions, and eventually he gets one. He's tried for 3. He finally gets one. That was all in the span of 98 seconds. But still, Lopes gets that submission, and he submits him in the very first round. Again, will Sabatini put himself in a position to get submitted? I don't know. I think Sabatini is a better wrestler, but in terms of grappling, can Lopes show that he is the better jiu-jitsu fighter? I don't know. It is very close. Again, striking-wise, I don't really know what to say because Don't forget, Diego Lopes loses a fight to Joannis and Brethu on the Contender Series. That was the original shot in the UFC to the UFC. He loses. Then he drops a fight right after that on Fury UFC for the featherweight championship against Nate Richardson. Richardson's a guy who likely won't ever see the UFC, I don't think. Then he wins one in Fury against a 10-8 guy. Then he wins in Lux against a 10-10 fighter. Again, do we really, like, I don't know. I feel like we kind of have to pump the brakes a little bit on Lopes here. I'm going to take Pat Sabatini. I'm going to take him with the experience. I know that's not the popular pick, but that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take Sabatini by decision. I think he goes out there and ends the hype. I think this is the end of the, at least for now, this is the end of the hype train of Diego Lopes. I just think, again, Sabatini's the better wrestler, and Sabatini's just going to hold on to him on the ground. He's going to take him down. He's not going to let Lopes do much else. Again, I think Lopes will try to throw up submissions, but I don't think Sabatini's going to get caught in one. I think Sabatini's going to do some really good work on the ground. Don't forget how good of a grappler this guy is and what he's been able to do in the UFC. Again, the one fight he loses, he gets taken down, and Jackson just goes for it with his ground and pound. Sure, he gets him. Don't think that's going to happen. I don't think Lopes is going to be able to do exactly what Jackson does to him. Sure, Sabatini's takedown defense isn't the greatest, so I think that's something to show. But Diego Lopes, in 3 fights, if you include the Contender, not able to get one takedown. He really relies on guys taking him down and trying to feed off that. I think if Sabatini fights this fight smart, which I'm anticipating him to do, I think he wins. So I'm actually going to take Pat Sabatini. I'm going to take the underdog in this fight, at least on Tapology. He is the favorite on the odds. That's why. I'm going to take Sabatini to win by unanimous decision. On to our next one. We've got a fight here between Matt Frevola and Benoit Saint-Denis. And this fight for Frevola, now ranked in the top 15 off of his win against Drew Dober at the Prudential Center in 2023 or earlier this year on that Aljamain Sterling and Henry Cejudo card. He'll be taking on Benoit Saint-Denis, who is 12-1 professionally, but has gotten a pretty nice run here in the UFC, winning 4 straight. Now, of course, the first fight being that fight against Lizio Zaleski dos Santos, where he takes a damn beating, but then comes back, beats Nicholas Stoltze by submission in the second round, knocks out Gabriel Miranda after that, submits Ismael Bonfim in the first round, and then finishes Thiago Moises in the second round, his last fight just 2 months ago. Benoit Saint-Denis is back, and he gets Frevola. And again, you know the damage that Benoit Saint-Denis is able to eat. This guy has got such a good chin. He's such a tough guy to put away. But Frevola, that's where he wins fights, though. Frevola, again, you look at the win over Drew Dober. He cracks Drew Dober's chin in the first round. Before that, he beats Atman Azaitar by finishing him in the first round. He beats Genaro Valdez by knocking out in the first round before that. And before that, gets finished by Terrence McKinney in 7 seconds. Before that, losing to Arman Tsarukyan by decision as well. But Frevola, on this 3-fight streak, has been really good. He's shown the power, again, knocking down Valdez 4 times in their fight in 2022. He finishes Atman Azaitar in November and then finishes Dober in the first round again, like I said, in May. But Benoit Saint-Denis, is he going to be able to put him down? I don't know. Saint-Denis is really good in terms of defensive. Well, okay, he eats punches with his face sometimes, but he's a tough guy to put away. And Saint-Denis is going to walk you down. I mean, that's what he did with Thiago Moises, right? Eventually, he finishes him in the second. He's able to go out there. He's able to take down Thiago Moises 5 times. The Ismael Bonfim fight, he submits him in the first. All around, Benoit Saint-Denis is pretty solid because he's got the striking game. Of course, again, the Miranda fight too, he knocks down Miranda 3 times, but he's also got the grappling as well. Again, 4 fights in the UFC, 4 wins in the UFC for Saint-Denis. He wins 2 of them by submission, wins 2 of them by knockout. The 2 submission wins are by rear naked choke. The Zaleski dos Santos fight kind of does well in the 3rd round, after eating all that damage in the first couple rounds. It's a tough fight to pick because you know the game that Frevola has got with the striking. A lot of power. I don't know really, though, what happens if Saint-Denis takes down Frevola, because Frevola's last time Frevola took on a really good wrestler was the Tsarukyan fight, and Arman Tsarukyan takes him down 10 times in that one. But again, Tsarukyan is trending towards the elite of the division. He's going to get Beneil Dariush next. We'll see what happens when that fight happens in, I believe, Austin, Texas, I think in December. I think it's a close fight. I think Saint-Denis is going to be able to get the victory. The odds -205 for Saint-Denis, +170 for Frevola. On Tapology, you got 80% going for Saint-Denis, 20% going for Frevola. Again, I think Saint-Denis is able to win because I don't think Frevola is able to crack the chin. That's the big difference in this one. Because Saint-Denis, again, really good chin. He's able to go out there. He's able to walk guys down because they're not able to knock him out. And if he has to fall on it, it's also the grappling too. Because Saint-Denis got the grappling and all the jiu-jitsu skills. He's been able to submit guys before. I think he'd be able to submit Frevola if the fight went down there as well. Striking-wise, I do like Saint-Denis too. I think Frevola does have heavy hands. But in terms of technical striking, I think Saint-Denis is slightly the better striker. So I'm going to take the French fighter. We're going to go with Benoit Saint-Denis to win the fight. I think it will be a fun one for as long as it does last. We'll give me Benoit Saint-Denis to win the second fight in the main card by second round at TKO. Next up, we have got Jessica Andrade taking on Mackenzie Dern. Andrade has lost 3 straight after winning earlier this year. This will be Andrade's 5th fight of 2023, but now 1-3 after her first fight, beating Lauren Murphy in Brazil. That absolute beatdown. Was not able to get a finish though, but then after that loses one to Erin Blanchfield in the main event just a month later, drops one to Yan Xiaonan where she gets knocked down in the first round, and then most recently getting submitted by Tatiana Suarez over in Nashville, Tennessee. Suarez submits her in the second round with a guillotine choke. Now getting probably the best jiu-jitsu practitioner in all of women's MMA in Mackenzie Dern. Now, of course, Dern has, she's struggled because she hasn't been able to get a takedown at all times, but Dern is that good at jiu-jitsu. 8-3 in the UFC, 13-3 professionally. Dern's coming off a main event victory over Angela Hill. Yes, that was a main event. They made us sit through that, but she goes out there, she beats Hill, she dominates, wins every single round but one, goes out there and just dominates on the ground, is able to knock down Angela Hill in the first round, which really sets the tone of the fight, drops the second, but then wins 3-5, does Dern. This fight's interesting because Jessica Andrade, before the Erin Blanchfield fight, going into the Erin Blanchfield fight, was seriously it's shot away from the belt. Even at the Yan Xiaonan fight, if she wins that fight, she's getting a title shot probably. Because you see where Yan Xiaonan is now, probably going to get Zhang Weili next. Don't know why that fight's not in China. I will, the UFC, Dana's all about making money. Why wouldn't you put Yan Xiaonan and Zhang Weili, the 2 best women's fighters at 115 pounds? They both happen to be Chinese. Why wouldn't you just put that fight in China? It does not make any sense in the world. They literally, when Zhang Weili got her title shot, they gave her the title shot just because the fight was in China against Andrade, just because they had a card in China, so they said, all right, give Zhang Weili the title fight. Doesn't make sense to me. But again, Andrade has lost back-to-back fights. Blanchfield stands in there in the first round, outstrikes Andrade. Second round, Blanchfield gets the takedown, and submits her just like that. Again, the Yan Xiaonan fight, she's knocked down in the first as Andrade, and the Suarez fight, Suarez is able to control her on the ground after kind of beating her in the first round, 2 striking-wise as well. I hate to say it, Jessica Andrade is kind of washed at this point. She has the most fights in women's MMA history in the UFC, which is 25. This will be the 26th walk for her going into this Saturday. Only 32 years old. She's been around for a very long time now in the UFC. Now, I mean, this fight's dependent on if Mackenzie Dern can take her down. I think Dern will be able to, just because I think Andrade is definitely a shell of her former self. I think she said it before herself that she fights for money at this point, money only. Because I believe Andrade is going through a divorce, I think. I don't know if this is true or not. I saw this on Twitter. I think she's going through a divorce or something and she needs money, so she's just fighting because she does make a pretty decent bag because she's a former UFC champion. I think that's what that is. But, yeah, I think Dern is able to get her down, believe it or not. 3 years ago, I wouldn't say that, but the Jessica Andrade that has shown up has looked very unmotivated and just has not looked great. I don't know if she trains all that much. I really don't. Now, if this fight is a pure stand-up fight, you would think Jessica Andrade would knock out Mackenzie Dern. You would think that, because Dern's striking leaves a lot to be desired. Again, primarily just a jiu-jitsu fighter who has shown, some varying moments of success on the feet. But you would think, again, if the fight's primarily a stand-up fight, Andrade would win, but I just don't know at this point. Andrade looked really bad. You've seen, Tatiana Suarez not look that horrible in a stand-up fight against Andrade. Erin Blanchfield, who was good, outstruck Andrade, though. Erin Blanchfield's a fighter that got outstruck by Taila Santos, right? I think Dern wins. I wouldn't, again, if she's not able to get a takedown, I think it's still trouble. But I think Dern's able to get a submission. I really think she's able to. I think it's going to be kind of like the Tatiana Suarez fight where it's going to take a round, but in the second round, Mackenzie Dern is going to take over, and Mackenzie Dern is going to get a submission. So I'm going to take Mackenzie Dern to win by second round sub. Again, the fight is kind of just dependent on how Dern gets the fight down. But I think she'll find a way to get the fight down. And you know how good Mackenzie Dern's grappling game is. She's got so many skills down there. We've seen her submit fighters before. The Nina Nunes fight is her last submission victory, sure. But still, we've seen her have a lot of success on the ground against an unmotivated Jessica Andrade, and against a Jessica Andrade who was, again, a shell of her former self, who was purely fighting for money and who's washed up at this point. Why wouldn't you take Mackenzie Dern in the spot? Dern is likely a fight away from the belt, it seems. I don't know why. Again, Zhang Weili does not fight all that much, and I don't know why they had her fight Lemos in her last fight. It should have been Zhang Weili, but again, I digress. Dern is close to a title shot. Andrade, sure, with the win, could get right back into the fold of things, but I still think Dern wins. I'm going to take Mackenzie Dern to win by second-round submission. She'll find a way to get Andrade down, and she will find a way to submit Andrade. On it now to only title fights from here on out. 2 more fights to go, and it'll be Sergey Pavlovich and Tom Aspinall up first. Again, for the interim heavyweight championship, originally supposed to be John Jones versus Stipe Miocic on this card. Jones tears his pec. Now we get Pavlovich and Aspinall instead. Again, I mentioned it at the very beginning of the video. The winner of this fight, I think someday will be the official undisputed world champion. I think it's kind of a given because, again, it is similar to the spot that Robert Whittaker was in when Michael Bisping was fighting George St. Pierre. Before that fight, they had Whittaker fight Yoel Romero. Now, at the time, Bisping was supposed to fight the winner of that fight because, of course, he had the thing with Romero. Romero said, "I love you, Mike." Michael Bisping. But still, that originally was supposed to be the fight. Whittaker beats Romero, and then George St. Pierre says he wants to come back. So George St. Pierre fights Michael Bisping. Does GSP want to fight a young Robert Whittaker? No. GSP vacates. Whittaker gets promoted to the interim champion. The UFC is not even hiding that this time around. They're purely saying, okay, Jones and Stipe are going to fight for the world championship. We'd like Jones or Stipe to fight the winner, but likely they will retire. Now, I think part of John Jones, if he beats Stipe Miocic, who I think he will, I think part of him might want to fight the winner of this fight just to leave no doubt as he retires. Part of me thinks that might happen. I think John Jones might come back to fight the winner of this fight. But again, if Jones beats Stipe at UFC 300 to be the greatest of all time, is there really much need for him again, not in the fans' perspective, but in John Jones' opinion, what does he get out of beating Sergey Pavlovich or Tom Aspinall after beating Stipe, who's the greatest heavyweight of all time? It would cement John as the greatest fighter of all time, I think. Again, I know Stipe's washed, but still, it would, right? Francis Ngannou is really the only other fight you'd want to see John Jones in. But is that really feasible? Is that going to happen? Probably not. So I don't think Jones would take the Pavlovich or Aspinall fight. I think the only fight that he wants other than Stipe is Ngannou, because at least to the public eye, again, if you're watching this video, you are a big MMA fan, you are a diehard mixed martial arts fan. But people who are just showing up just because or watching because it's a UFC card, they don't know who Sergey Pavlovich and Tom Aspinall are. It's just the fact. They don't know who these guys are. So that's, I don't think John really wants to take the winner of this fight because it's a dangerous fight, whoever you get. Aspinall, really dangerous on the ground, really dangerous striker too, but again, has shown how he's been able to mix it up on the ground has been really dangerous too for most guys, and his boxing's elite too. Again, trained with Tyson Fury back in the day. Tom Aspinall's got a very dangerous striking game, and again, the grappling, you've seen him go out there, you've seen him take down Alexander Volkov and go straight for the straight armbar and submits him right away. Andre Arlovsky was able to immediately get a takedown, find the rear naked choke. Aspinall is good, right? Or Sergey Pavlovich, on the other hand, really good striker. He's got a lot of power. Maybe he has the most power that we've seen in the heavyweight division since Francis Ngannou. You've seen the knockouts. They've gone from, in this main run, it's gone from Shamila Durakhimov to Derek Lewis to Tai Tuivasa and then to Curtis Blades. He's gone out there and he's knocked all of these guys out. Now, how I'm picking this fight, and I'll just say it now and so I can explain. I'm picking Sergey Pavlovich to actually beat Tom Aspinall. I know I've not talked much about this fight. I will in a second, but I'm actually taking Sergey Pavlovich, and I'm taking Sergey Pavlovich, believe it or not, to win by first round knockout. My main reasoning for that is Sergey Pavlovich has been training and been getting ready for a fight all along. He has been the backup for John Jones and Stipe Miocic. He has been, training for this fight. Tom Aspinall just got a call a week ago to get off the couch and start training for a world championship fight. That's a big difference. It is a huge difference. Pavlovich has been training, and it's not like, again, Aspinall's got to cut to make the weight. He doesn't. But he hasn't been active in the gym, or at least he hasn't been preparing and, mentally preparing for a world championship fight. Pavlovich, at least at the back of his mind, has been thinking about it. But Aspinall wasn't really thinking he'd be getting this title shot because, again, Pavlovich is the backup, right? You were thinking Aspinall would probably fight Pavlovich regardless, but this quickly, I don't know. That's why I'm taking Pavlovich to win the fight. On a full camp, I would likely take Tom Aspinall. I think the wrestling game, again, and it remains true for this fight as well. If Aspinall wins, he's going to have to mix it up with the wrestling. He's going to have to mix it up with the wrestling. He's going to have to, drag this fight later into the fight because the first round for Pavlovich is by far the most dangerous. Pavlovich has not been out of the first round in the UFC. And again, we don't know what Sergey Pavlovich is going to be outside of the first round. He just hasn't seen that since a fight in Fight Nights Global for the heavyweight championship over there in 2017. Now, Pavlovich has gone 25 minutes before, but that was 6 years ago. Last time he's been out of the first round was 6 years ago. Tom Aspinall, if he's going to win this fight, though, he's going to have to win it with his wrestling. You look at Sergey Pavlovich's last loss. It's his only loss. First fight in the UFC debut in China, undercard for Francis Ngannou and Curtis Blades. Alistair Overeem takes him down and beats his skull in the first round and wins by TKO. That's Sergey Pavlovich's only loss. And it remains, I think, the blueprint to beat him. Gotta try to take him down. I don't know why Curtis Blades didn't really try more for that. He tried once when they fought earlier this year. Didn't really try for it as much as he should have. That's the pathway and the blueprint to beat Sergey Pavlovich. Will Tom Aspinall do that? I think he'll try, but I think Pavlovich is going to win because he's been preparing for a fight, and I think Pavlovich is going to catch Tom Aspinall. But if Aspinall is able to get a takedown in the first round, that's huge. This has got to be the game plan for Tom Aspinall. Get a takedown in the first round and get it to the second round no matter what. Just lay on him. Just make Pavlovich tired going into the second round, and that's where you start to break him because Pavlovich is getting tired. A big guy like him is going to get tired. Aspinall can really start working in his boxing, mixing it up with the takedowns, and that's how Aspinall, I think, can really win the fight. But I'm thinking, and I'm going to go with Sergey Pavlovich to win the fight by first round knockout. I think a big factor in this fight is that Pavlovich has been preparing for a world championship fight. Tom Aspinall hasn't. And of course, the power is always going to be there. Aspinall has not fought a guy with the power of Pavlovich. I think Pavlovich wins. Aspinall is coming off a win over Marcin Tybura. Pavlovich is coming off wins of Derek Lewis, Tai Tuivasa, and Curtis Blades. I'm going to take Sergey Pavlovich to win the fight by first round knockout. I just think, again, the power is going to be too much for Aspinall, and not preparing for this fight is going to hurt him a little bit. I think Pavlovich wins, becomes the new interim champion. We'll see if he eventually fights John Jones. My money would be no. I don't think he would. I think Pavlovich, come around April, will be the undisputed world champion. We will see. The UFC's got their next big Russian heavyweight. They never got Fedor. Here's your Fedor. I guess it's not the same. Anyways, on to the main event. For the vacant light heavyweight championship, you've got the former light heavyweight champion in Yuri Prochazka taking on Alex Pereira. Pereira, of course, coming up from 185 pounds. His first fight in the light heavyweight division is a win over Jan Blachowicz, a very impressive performance. Could have gone either way, I'll be honest with you. I think the scorecards, I'm fine with the Pereira victory. I honestly would have been fine with the Blachowicz victory, but Pereira wins. And now he gets slotted right into a fight for the world championship against Yuri Prochazka. This is big. It is a huge fight for the light heavyweight belt. Yuri Prochazka coming off of what Dana White says to be the worst shoulder injury he has seen in UFC history. Obviously, it did not happen in a fight. It happened in training when he's preparing for the second fight against Glover Teixeira. But Dana White says it has the worst shoulder injury he has ever seen. He beats Glover Teixeira in maybe the fight of the year in 2022. It was a tremendous fight. He beats Glover Teixeira by submission, but don't forget where that fight was going leading up to the submission. I thought it was 2-2. Teixeira wins the first, Prochazka wins the second and the third. Glover wins the fourth. Glover was on his way to winning the fifth round until he tires and gasses out with a minute to go. Prochazka takes the back and Prochazka submits him. Don't forget, leading up until that last minute, Glover's beating him in the fifth. And Teixeira was finding a lot of success in the striking game. Yuri does leave himself to get hit on the feet. He does. He is a crazy man. He is a crazy guy who does not give a rat's ass about getting hit on the feet. But he does get hit. Glover Teixeira was hitting him a lot. And again, Glover Teixeira was 30 seconds away from retaining the championship, and this whole sequence, the light heavyweight belt, how it goes from Blachowicz to Teixeira to Prochazka to Hill and out of the winner of this fight. That whole sequence really changes. You never get the vacant fight with Ankalaev and Blachowicz. You don't get a lot of these different elements for the belt. I think that's, though, a huge thing to remember in this fight, that Glover Teixeira was winning at points in the feet against Prochazka. Not to say Prochazka was winning at points, too. Definitely, Prochazka was winning in the middle rounds of that fight. But the fourth came, and Teixeira was doing well, and the fifth was really a big Teixeira round as well, like the first round. And I think going into that fight, a lot of people were like, okay, well, it's either an early knockout by Prochazka or it's a submission by Teixeira, because either of those guys can't contend with each other in terms of striking or grappling. Well, you saw what happened. Again, that's why I think it's the fight of the year in 2022. But that's my point. Prochazka was getting kind of at points was getting pieced by Glover Teixeira. If you get pieced by Alex Pereira, you are getting knocked out. That's the difference. Do I think we get a crazy back and forth fight in the feet? Maybe, but I think Prochazka will try to take him down. I think Prochazka's going to have to swallow the pride a little bit, and he's going to have to try to take down Alex Pereira. The only time Yuri Prochazka has taken down anybody is when he found himself in a little bit of danger against Dominic Reyes. But again, the guy's only had 3 UFC fights. Volkan, he knocks him out, knocks out Dominic Reyes with that crazy spinning back elbow in the second round, and then wins the belt against Glover Teixeira. He's only had 3 fights in the UFC. Alex Pereira, for only having 10 fights professionally, has had 6 now. And he's already won a world championship. He's already lost a world championship. Now, let's talk about Pereira, right? Okay, he has a win over the middleweight champion, Sean Strickland. The Israel Adesanya, when he beats him the first fight. The second fight, he's looking even better than the first fight until Izzy loads up, catches him with a big right hand, and knocks him out. That doesn't happen. You go the next 40 seconds, Pereira's up 2-0 in the rematch. I think Pereira likely beats Adesanya. Pereira was really finding his striking going into that round. And I hate to say it, I think Izzy kind of got lucky. I think Adesanya just kind of timed one, which, is it luck, is it skill, whatever, it's precision. That's what it is out of Adesanya. It's a good strike. He landed a really good one. The guy's still a really good striker, obviously, even though he lost to Strickland. I'm not denying the fact that Adesanya is really good. I just think Pereira is better still. I still think Pereira is a better striker. I think if they had a third fight, Pereira would beat his ass, right? I think Izzy had just timed up a really good strike and put down Pereira and knocked him out. You look at the Pereira-Blachowicz fight, tough fight. It's up the elevation in Salt Lake City. Tough fight, Pereira wins. He loses the first, definitely. The second round, it's a Pereira round. The third round is a Pereira round as well. It's close. The second round's a split round. I think Pereira wins the fight. Originally watching it, I'm not going to lie, I thought Jan Blachowicz won. When I first watched it, I thought Blachowicz won. Rewatched it later that week, thought Pereira won. Rewatched it again, I still think Pereira wins. I don't think there's much controversy around that fight. Again, at the time, I thought Blachowicz won, but rewatching it, I'm pretty good with the Pereira victory. I don't blame you for having a Blachowicz scorecard, but I think Pereira, that's definitely the right card. Okay. Alex Pereira, Yuri Prochazka. Again, I hate to say it, but Prochazka, again, if he does, and not to say that he wasn't beating Glover too when they were on the feet, but also, again, Glover was having his moments. If you're getting hit by Glover Teixeira like that, Yuri Prochazka is going to get hit by Alex Pereira like that too. And he's going to get put down by Pereira because Pereira is not going to play around. He's a way better striker than Glover Teixeira is. He just is. Alex Pereira is one of the greatest kickboxers of all time. I think Pereira wins. Because the style of fight that Yuri Prochazka fights is a crazy back and forth fight in the feet where he's willing to take one to give one. I don't think you can do that against Pereira. I think Pereira is too good to do that against. I think Alex Pereira becomes the new champion. He wins by second round knockout. Pereira gets to becomes a two division champion. He's not killing himself to make 185 pounds anymore. He's at 205. I think he gets a second belt, which is crazy because when you look at the list of guys that have won multiple belts in the UFC, it is a short list. Yeah, it is a very short list, but also at the same time, it's guys who have been in the sport for a very long time. And Yuri Prochazka is going to come Alex Pereira is going to come straight in here and just win 2 belts, which is absolutely crazy because the only guys who have won 2 belts, now at the same time, the only guy is, the only 2 fighters are, or it's 3 now, right? Cejudo too. Crap, it's 4. Conor, Amanda Nunes, DC, Cejudo, but also Couture's won in multiple weight classes, BJ Penn's won in multiple weight classes, GSP's won in multiple weight classes, and John Jones has too, right? I think Pereira is actually going to become the 9th to do it in different weight classes. Crazy. The guy has not been in the sport that long. He's fought 11 fights, but I think he does it here. Because again, I think the fight that Yuri fights, he leaves himself wide open to get hit. Pereira's going to hit him, and Pereira's going to put him down. I don't think Yuri Prochazka, I think Prochazka has to wrestle him, but we have seen Pereira fight decently against a pretty decent wrestler in Jan Blachowicz. I think Pereira's able to fight that off. Prochazka does look to shoot. I think Pereira keeps it on the feet, and I think Pereira is going to eventually get Yuri on the feet because the way Yuri fights, he leaves himself open to get hit too much. I think Alex Pereira, in his 11th professional mixed martial arts fight, becomes a 2-division champion, and he becomes the new world champ. Alex Pereira wins. He gets the job done. It's crazy, but I think Pereira wins. I think eventually we might see Izzy come back to 205 pounds and look to fight the third fight, but I think Pereira wins. Likely, I don't know who he fights. There's no fight for him right now. Truly, there actually is no fight because Ankalaev and Walker have to fight again. So I'm hoping UFC should do. Doesn't make sense, but you should put that fight in China. Johnny Walker and Magomed Ankalaev should be fighting in China. I think the winner of that fight can fight Pereira next. But I think Alex Pereira wins the belt. I've been after that fight with Walker and Ankalaev. Jamal Hill should be back for the World Championship shot. So Pereira wins. He knocks out Prochazka, gets him in the second round. So that'll do it, folks. Thank you all for watching our UFC 295 predictions here on the channel. Make sure that subscribe button down below for more. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy the video. Thank you folks again for watching, and Mamba forever.